Welcome back to CNN. Events are being held around the United States to remember the almost 3,000 men and women and children who died in the 9/11 attacks in 2001. This is the scene now at the Memorial Plaza in Manhattan. There will be pauses at 6 different moments, twice to mark the times that each plane hit the towers, twice at the time each tower fell, and at the times of the attacks on the Pentagon and Flight 93. The first moment of silence takes place in just a moment. Tonight, the tribute of lights will shine from New York from sunset until dawn. This is how it looked Wednesday evening in New York for the traditional tribute in light to honor those who lost their lives in the destruction of the World Trade Center. In Washington, dignitaries are remembering the men and women who died in the attack on the Pentagon, and a ceremony is being held in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where hijacked Flight 93 went down. The live pictures you were seeing just a moment ago are, of course, what has become a tradition, and that is the families of the victims of the World Trade Center attack reading the names of their loved ones. This will happen for all of the victims that died that day in the towers. It has become a familiar scene, but there is much that is different this year as well. For the first time, the National September 11th Memorial Museum will be open on the anniversary. A nearly completed One World Trade Center has risen. You can see that there on your right. It is 1,776 feet above ground zero, and it's expected to be filled with office workers by the next anniversary of 9/11. And I can tell you, for someone who's passed that site almost every day since the attacks, what used to be a boarded up construction zone for years is now full of people. The streets are opened. Those pools, those memorial pools, which we will see throughout the day, are open to the public now and filled with people every day. Of course, as I said, we are watching family members of the deceased read the names of their loved one. Elected officials are also going to be there, and President, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and former Mayor Michael Bloomberg, a very familiar figure to many of you, are both expected to attend. Beginning at 7:30, the museum was open to the families of those who perished in the 1993 as well as the 2001 World Trade Center attacks. As we have been saying, there will be a moment of silence. You can see an officer standing by the bell.
Klaus Botha.
Carol Marie Bouchard.
The families have resumed reading the names. President Obama will lead 9/11 commemorations from the Pentagon. On Wednesday, he told the people of America that the U.S. will lead a broad coalition to destroy ISIS. In a national televised address, he said U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and in Syria would be part of the strategy to achieve that. From the White House, Jim Acosta reports.
My fellow Americans,
it was a cautious commander-in-chief, no more, rolling the dice with an ambitious plan to wipe out ISIS.
our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy.
The president's biggest leap, ramping up U.S. airstrikes on ISIS targets in both Iraq and Syria.
I've made it clear that we will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
To help expand those airstrikes, the president is sending 475 more U.S. service members to Iraq, raising the total there to 1,600. Add to that a new mission to equip and train moderate Syrian rebels. To make that happen, the president has been working the phones to build a global coalition that officials say includes Saudi Arabia, which will host a training program for anti-ISIS fighters. But the president also insisted the war on ISIS will be different.
But I want the American people to understand how this effort will be different from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil.
But Mr. Obama's decision reopened old wounds as Republican Senator John McCain and the president's former press secretary and now CNN contributor Jay Carney clashed over whether the president is to blame.
The fact that they didn't leave a residual force in Iraq, overruling all of his military advisors, is the reason why we're facing ISIS today.
I think that, on the question of the residual force, there was another player in that, which was the Iraqi government, A. B, it was the fulfillment of the previous administration's withdrawal plans.
You are again saying facts that are patently false.
Senator, I can posit with great respect for you that we disagree on that, and that you...
No, you can't, because you
sir,
don't
if
have
I
the
may.
facts. You don't have the facts, Mr. Carney. That's the problem.
Senator, I understand that you present the facts that you believe are true based on the argument that you've made for a long time, sir, that we should leave troops in Iraq in perpetuity. And that's just not what this president believes. And that's, obviously he was elected president to fulfill what he believed was right for our country and right for our national security.
Looking forward, expect more debate over the Syrian rebels that will take the fight to ISIS on behalf of the U.S. Senior administration officials say they're being vetted, but Republicans were skeptical before the speech.
Tonight I want to speak to you.
Let's get some reaction to the president's plan from Iraq. CNN's Jamana Karadsheh is in Baghdad. And Jamana, how is the speech being received there?
It is being really welcomed by Iraqi officials here. There's that sense, Maggie, of finally. This is something that they have wanted to see for a very long time now. Iraqis say that they need more support. They needed more U.S. support, more international support. They felt that they are fighting this battle on behalf of the world, and they could not do this on their own. And now they're starting to see action. They're starting to see more U.S. support, more movement on the international and regional level. Now, Iraqi officials we've spoken to over recent weeks and months would tell you they have a list of things, list of elements and measures that need to take place in order to try and weaken and ultimately, as the U.S. puts it, defeat ISIS. Among those things is we saw the Iraqi security forces here very fragile. They pretty much crumbled in the face of that ISIS advance we saw back in June. So they realized that their forces need more support in terms of advising, training, equipping, and the United States is providing more of that, and that's going to be critical. The airstrikes, now they wanted a broadening of the air campaign that the United States started last month, and they will get that according to President Obama. This is going to be very important. We saw the impact of these airstrikes in their limited scope. Broadening that will allow them to go now on the offensive. And also really important on the diplomatic level, Maggie, they say the regional cooperation is very important here. They feel that the United States has a role here to play, and that we are seeing this today with Secretary Kerry's meetings in Jeddah. That is really important. They want to see regional cooperation to stem the flow of foreign fighters and stop that funding, that lifeline that ISIS has. They also, the big issue here for them is they've heard the promises that the United States is going to do more about Syria. They want to see that happen. They admit that this is a main problem. You can try and weaken ISIS here. You can go after ISIS here, but those non-existent borders for this group between Syria and Iraq really give it the capabilities and abilities to regroup in Syria and have its headquarters and safe haven there. So a lot of officials here saying they want to see action when it comes to Syria because Iraqis cannot do this on their own, Maggie.
Jamana, thank you so much. I want to pick up on that thread of funding. In his speech, President Obama promised action to stem the flow of foreign fighters through the Middle East and choke off the militants' access to money. Let's look at that part of strategy with our emerging markets editor, John Defterios, who is in Abu Dhabi for us. John, thanks so much for joining us. You and I have talked much about the funding of ISIS, the fact that it is extremely well funded. Does the president's speech begin to touch on that or change the approach of how they're going to deal with that funding?
Well, the hope is it'll build up the momentum from this point going forward. He did lay out a strategy to suggest on airstrikes and even perhaps the support of special forces, but the debate needs to change on tackling the financial network. We know it has three sources of funding. Right now, the oil sales coming out of Iraq and Syria, some 80,000 barrels a day, extortion from the properties that it seized through its attacks into northern Iraq. But most importantly, this all started with financial fundraising and the networks built up here in the Middle East. And the president is suggesting now we have to rethink this strategy and pull it together within the coalition. Let's take a listen.
Third, we will continue to draw on our substantial counterterrorism capabilities to prevent ISIL attacks. Working with our partners, we will redouble our efforts to cut off its funding, improve our intelligence, strengthen our defenses, counter its warped ideology, and stem the flow of foreign fighters into and out of the Middle East. And in 2 weeks, I will chair a meeting of the UN Security Council to further mobilize the international community around this effort.
And this effort, Maggie, is not a new one. In fact, you can go back to the tracing of the financial networks of al-Qaeda to 2003, and it has continued, but it's been very sporadic, if that's the criticism. In fact, last month, UN Resolution 2170 listed 6 organizations, again, most of those in the Gulf states here in the Middle East, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, individuals sympathetic to the Sunni cause. The U.S. Treasury has listed 6 organizations in the last year, and Undersecretary David Cohen of the U.S. Treasury, before President Obama's speech, suggested we need to double the efforts going forward because this is the true support of the ISIS network going forward.
So, John, in order to be effective now, do they just have to get really serious and tighten the grip on this small group that's been identified, or do they need to expand this and broaden this?
Well, in fact, Maggie, since the speech and then leading up to President Obama's speech, we started to hear a number of rumblings here from the region suggesting that the effort by the U.S. Treasury, the United Nations, and in fact, collectively, hasn't been good enough. A list of 6 at the UN, 20 at the United States over the last 10 years. In fact, one op-ed from a prominent Kuwaiti professor is suggesting he has a list of 130, and admittedly saying a third come from the Middle East. So we have to tackle it at home. Secondarily, we saw the UAE ambassador to the United States be quite forthright in an op-ed in the New York Times. Let's take a look at what Yusuf Otaiba was suggesting here. He's suggesting the financing network must be choked off through an organized program of much better intelligence, more aggressive law enforcement, and even tougher sanctions. Going on to say, this is not a battle only in the field or the field of battle, but also the financial complex that is the lifeblood of extremism. They're suggesting this is not a cancer that can be contained right now. We have to change the discussion. It has to be cut out, Maggie.
A battle that is being fought on many fronts. John Defteris for us. Thank you so much. Let's cross back now to Lower Manhattan. We have been watching live pictures of the commemoration happening there. Poppy Harlow joins us now. And Poppy, this is such a difficult day for many New Yorkers, a day of sorrow, but increasingly also a day of pride for how much of the rebuilding has happened, how vibrant downtown is. And it's amazing to watch those pictures of some of the family members getting up there. Many of them were small children, I remember, barely able to get up on the podium or talk, and now they're young adults.
Good morning, Maggie. Absolutely. One of them that we spoke with, 4 years old when her father was killed in this attack. She's 17 today. For her, being here every year, reading those names brings her closer to her dad. You can certainly understand that. Another family that I've known for years, the Aldermans, they lost their 25-year-old son, Peter. He would have been 38 had he not been murdered that day. They don't come down here for the ceremony, but they do watch and listen for his name to be read. His mother telling me last night, it's important that someone that loves him hears his name. Everyone deals with this in their own way. They try to cope as best they can. This city has tried to cope for the last 13 years, but what we have not been is defeated. I lived here when we were attacked. I've lived here ever since. And let's pan up and to show you again what One World Trade Center looks like today, because it is remarkable and it is a symbol to the world that this country and all of us cannot be defeated. That will open later this year. A few other things of note. Today, for the first time on 9/11, the plaza, that beautiful memorial memorial with the running water there and the big area with all the names etched in. That will be open for the public this evening to come in for the first time on 9/11. Also this morning, the 9/11 Museum opened early for the family members to be able to go there ahead of the ceremony if they wanted to spend some time there. And of course, you have a lot of police officers around, no question, because this city is always on high alert. And on 9/11, you've got thousands of police officers out. No specific threat, the NYPD Police Commissioner Bill Bratton telling me, against this city at this point in time, but you can believe that their eyes and ears, cameras are on any and all of those potential targets, bridges, tunnels, etc., as this city honors those lives that were lost, focuses on how we move forward, but always is on alert because this city is often a target. Maggie?
And that has been echoed by the newish Mayor de Blasio today. Poppy, thank you so much.
Right.
You are watching World Business Today, live from New York. Coming up, we will bring you all the latest from the Oscar Pistorius trial, live from South Africa after an engrossing day of proceedings.